Dear learners, we shall be starting with the lecture on the kinds of business organizations, part 6. In this lecture, we shall be taking up some other features or core characteristics of a company. In the preceding lectures, we have already discussed the two most important characteristic features of a company, that is limited liability and independent corporate personality, connected to which we had also taken a discussion on the theories of owner shielding and theory of entity shielding. So in this part 6 lecture, we shall be continuing with our discussion on the core characteristics of a company. These two, legal personality and limited liability, have already been covered. Now today, in this lecture, we shall be taking up the characteristics of delegated management, transferability of shares, raising of finances, how company is a very fertile institution for raising finances, and how it makes it advantageous as compared to some other peer business organizations. And then lastly, the aspect of perpetual succession. Now, across the globe and jurisdictions, the objective of various company legislations is to confer the company with this 6 core characteristics. Now, there might be some variations in some jurisdictions, but by and large speaking, these characteristics form the core of a company wherever you see them. So now the first characteristic that we are going to take up today is the characteristic of delegated management. Now, what do we mean when we say that a corporate form of ownership has got delegate management? So to begin with, it signifies separation of ownership of the business with the management of the business. Now, when we talk about ownership of business, essentially speaking, shareholders are considered to be owners of the business because they make investment in the company. On the other hand, the management of the business vests with a different body which is known as the board of directors, along with certain key managerial personnel of a company like the CEO, COO, CFO, so on and so forth. So there is a kind of a segregation of the duties and responsibilities between these two varying stakeholders of a company. Now, why this is called as delegated management is because in a company, the final or the ultimate authority, it vests with the stakeholders who are known as shareholders. While it is correct that the final authority rests with the shareholders, however, the shareholders do not directly exercise such authority. So, shareholders delegate this authority to a body that is known as the board of directors. So, in a company, what practically happens is that most of the business decisions of the company, except the most fundamental decisions which are major in nature and which have a potential to alter the fundamental character of the company or the business of the company, they are taken by the board of directors and not by the shareholders. So we can say that the shareholders exercise their authority in a company through a body of elected representatives who are known as the board of directors. The board of directors are appointed by the shareholders. Just like in a democracy, in a parliamentary democracy such as ours, so we as citizens and electorates, we do not directly get involved in lawmaking. we appoint elected representatives known as legislators or parliamentarians who represent us in the highest decision making or law making body like the parliament or the state legislature, as may be the case. So in the same way, the shareholders, they exercise their authority through the directors in a company. We have section 149 of the Companies Act, which provides for the constitution and composition of a board of directors for the management of the company. Now, what is the rationale for this delegated management or separation of ownership on one hand and management on the other hand? Along with the rationale, there are certain benefits of this delegated management. So, firstly speaking, the integration of ownership with the management is unworkable for large public companies because of what we call as information or coordination costs. Now, what do we mean by when we say that information and coordination costs, and why it is not practical for a very large body of shareholders, especially in a public company like Tata, Reliance, so on and so forth? The reason for that is very simple. Now, imagine yourself that you are engaged in a decision making in any organization. So, in that organization, let us say that the decision maker run into thousands and lakhs of people who will decide. So, obviously, there are going to be certain costs which are associated with getting everybody to arrive at a consensus. It is going to take a lot of effort. And so, to take example of any public company, take the example of Britannia, for example. Now, it consists of thousands of shareholders. It is a company that is listed on the stock exchange. Now, it will not be practical for all those thousands of shareholders to come together and take business decisions on a day-to-day basis. So, therefore, instead of those all thousand shareholders coming together and taking business decision on an everyday basis or periodical basis, what they do is that those thousands of shareholders sit together and they appoint a body of board of directors. A board of directors is a small body from 2 to 15 directors. So these are small number of people who can sit together and take business decisions on behalf of the shareholders of a company. So this makes it practical for large public companies. The next aspect is that of professional management. Now, board of directors, they are persons who are usually vested with good business management, human resource, marketing, and domain knowledge of the business with which the company is actually engaged in. So, shareholders, individual shareholders, may not be business experts. So, therefore, if you take your own example, now some of you are students, some of you are working professionals, some of you are students of management, some of you are students of law, some of you are students of commerce, some of you are students of engineering, so on and so forth. So, similarly, in case of a company, what happens is that because a large public company has got thousands of shareholders, some of whom are doctors, some of whom are students, some of whom are professionals, so they don't have domain or expertise knowledge to actually run a company. So, therefore, having a separate management for a company consisting of certain professionals works in the interests of the thousands of shareholders who are not professionals. And so, this is also kind of beneficial for a company to raise the finances, because the proposal of a big large company to the potential shareholders is that what you only require to do is to make an investment of your money. You don't require much of your time, effort, as well as intellectual effort in running the day-to-day affairs of the company. For that, we are going to have a separate body of the board of directors. So the shareholders, they just give their money, and the business decisions, they are actually taken by the board of directors. So in this way, it is possible for an individual investor such as us or me. So I can make in 10 different companies. It can be a pharmaceutical company, it can be a fast moving consumer goods, it could be a oil and petroleum company, so on and so forth. So I don't have to be an expert in every field in which the company where I have investment I am involved with. So being an investor is one thing and managing the business is something else. So shareholders, as they come from various different backgrounds, it is not always going to happen that they are also experts in managing the business of the company. The third is that because the board of directors, they are elected by the company's shareholder, so the obvious utility of this approach is to ensure that the board of directors, they remain responsive to the interest of the shareholders who bear the cost of the company's decisions and interests, because essentially the capital requirement of a company is given by the shareholders. So the shareholders exercise some influence over the board of directors because it is they who appoint them. And obviously, because the shareholders appoint them, the shareholders can also remove them. So the board of directors, it consists of many directors. It is a body. So having a body of many directors, it prevents concentration of authority into individual hands, and it ensures mutual checks and monitoring of the decisions of the board of directors. Now, this delegated management aspect is very useful if a business has a lot of shareholders or investors. But this aspect of delegated management is absent in some of the other business organizations, like that of proprietorship or even partnership for that matter. So there the investors as well as managers, they have the same role. So in a proprietorship, one is the investor and he's also heavily invested in managing the business of the proprietorship. Same may be the case with partnership. So for small businesses where people require a lot of control over their businesses, everything they want to do together, there the delegated management is not useful. But where the investors largely want to remain detached from the everyday transactions of the business, this delegated management principle becomes very useful. Moving on to the next core characteristic, which is transferability of shares. Now, there is a provision, section 44 of the Companies Act, which declares the shares of a company to be movable property. By movable property, we mean that they could be sold or disposed of, and they can move from one hand to another hand, just like a movable property or a commodity. Now, how the shares are going to be transferred, in what manner, by what process and procedure, it is provided under a document of the company that is known as the Articles of Association. Now, this aspect of transferability of shares has to be differentiated from tradability. So, tradability refers to the potential of any commodity to be actually sold in the market. Now, whether the owner wants to sell it or not, it depends upon its transferability. So, if I say that I am an owner of a pen or I am an owner of my laptop, this is something that is very tradable, but I may not choose to sell it, so it is not transferable that way. So, in the same way, the transferability of shares in a big public company which is listed on the stock exchange, shares could be easily transferred because stock exchange is like a platform for exchange of shares or for selling of shares or buying of shares for transactions related to shares. So we say that it is kind of an open-ended market. Now, what is a public company? What is a listed company? We will be examining this in great detail in a separate lecture on the kinds of companies which are also business organizations. But in a private company, as the word suggests, that the company consists of fewer number of members who are private individuals, and mostly they are known to each other. Not more than 200 members a private company can have. So there may be more restrictions on the transfer of shares. So transferability also varies upon the kind of company, whether it is a public or a private company. The benefits of transferability of shares again are several, beginning with that it accords liquidity to the shareholder. So if I know that if I am owner of any share of any company and it can be readily sold in the stock exchange, then I know that whenever I require to cash on it or I need to liquidify it, it can be readily sold in the market in a reasonable period of time, which accords liquidity to my investment. The second is the aspect of stability to the company. Now, why this transferability accords stability to the company? Because a company which runs its business, it requires a constant inflow and retention of capital. So it is not to the company's benefit if there is an outflow of a lot of capital of the company. Obviously, inflow of more capital is more beneficial for the business. But in case of transfer of shares, generally what happens is that if there is a seller of shares, you'll only be able to sell your shares if somebody is going to buy your shares. So share transfer is exchange of hands of shares. Somebody sells it and somebody else buys it. So what this ensures is that the financial stability of the company remains intact. Because if I have a paid up share capital, so I have a share of a company in which I have paid the entire amount, and tomorrow I sell it to somebody else. So the paid up amount remains paid up. So there is no difference on the capital contribution to the company. So irrespective of the buying and selling of shares, the capital of a company remains intact, although the shareholders, they may change hands. The third is the assignment of contract. So if I am a shareholder in any company, so I have a contractual relationship with the company that I promise to contribute capital to the company, or I have already contributed capital to the company, and the company has certain obligations toward me. For example, I can participate in the meetings of the company and I am entitled to profits or dividends of the company, so on and so forth. So this is a contract. So when I sell my shares in a company, there is also the assignment of contract which is represented by those shares. So if I sell it to a person X, so that contract between me and the company is now transferred to person X and the company. So that is also a way of assigning the contracts from one person to another person. Now moving on to the third aspect, which is raising of finances. Now this especially is a very strong feature of a company which distinguishes it immensely from some of the other business organizations like proprietorship, partnership, so on and so forth. This is a point where the company gets the most amount of strength. And there are reasons for the same. Firstly is the aspect of limited liability. Now the aspect of limited liability is very strong because here essentially the proposal to the shareholders is that you please make an investment with us. We give you an assurance that your personal assets, which are not subject to the amount you have actually invested to the company, they will remain protected. We are only asking you for so much of amount, which is the price of our shares. And we give you the promise that while there is a lot of potential for you to grow your investment in the company, like the price of the shares or the dividends which you will earn when the company makes profits. So whereas your rewards, the potential is unlimited, but insofar as the risks are concerned, they are limited. This aspect we've already covered in the discussion on owner shielding. So the prospect of reward is infinite and the prospect of risk is limited or finite. So this is something that is very attractive to shareholders or potential shareholders to be able to be drawn towards making an investment in the company. The other aspect which makes a company very popular is that in a big public company, there are various kinds of companies, but when we talk about big public companies, then there is no limit into how many number of members they can have. And meaning thereby there is no limit on the number of investors they can have. Meaning thereby there is no limit on the number of shares that a company can issue. So if a company has very extensive, large business which requires a lot of capital, and those who have actually started the company, that is the promoters of a company, they are not able to make all the arrangements themselves, then they can rely on external shareholders, any number which are required for subscribing to the shares of the company. So therefore, given the aspect of limited liability and disparity in the risks and reward, and the fact that a company can have unlimited membership of shareholders, it makes it a very desirable business organization for raising of finances. Then the next aspect is diversified investment. Now, for the individual shareholders, there is no management cost, meaning thereby that shareholders they do not participate in the day-to-day and normal functioning or business decisions of the company. And so, what they are only required to do is, as we have discussed in the aspect related to delegated management, is to make an investment in the company. They are only restricted to investment and not to management. Now, many shareholders obviously they do not have time for making an investment and also managing the business. So they may have certain other profession or vocation like doctors, engineers, lawyers. That is not their full-time job. So directors of a company and key managerial personnel of a company have a full-time job in a company. So all the management part is taken by them. So if I as an investor, I'm only interested in having a good premium on my investment and having a good return on investment, and I don't have time for management of the company. So this is a very attractive offer which I receive from a company. That company says that you only give us your investment, rest everything we are going to take care. In the same way as you have the your fund manager in a mutual fund. The fund manager says is that you please give your funds to me. I am going to take care that you get a good return on investment. You don't have to bother about where that money is invested in what stocks, because I am somebody who has got a lot of domain expertise, professional knowledge about the securities and the share market. So I am going to take those decisions. So the shareholders do not have a headache of managing the business of the company or running the business of a company. And so whenever they want to exit their investment in any company, they can do so by selling their shares on the stock exchange. So in this way, one can be an investor in various different kinds of companies. Now, raising of finances is also facilitated by what we call as equity in a company, which means that the price of the shares is not related to the value of individual shareholders. So there is a single price of shares independent of the wealth of individual shareholders. So this ensures that investors they can come from a very wide spectrum of economic situation. So for example, if somebody is a billionaire, so the value of one share of that company which is owned by the billionaire will be the same as if that that share is also owned by let's say somebody who's from the lower middle class or the middle class. So the price of the share remains the same irrespective of the holder of the shares. So this ensures that people from uh, all economic backgrounds, they can be investors in a company. So what we see here is all the points that are mentioned here: the limited liability, disparity, infinity of membership, no management cost. These are all benefits which are there of the shareholders as investors and also the company. And some of these are not available in some other business organizations, like that of sole proprietorship, which has unlimited liability, as we will discuss, partnership, which also has got unlimited liability, and limited liability partnership also. Uh, some of these benefits are not available to a limited liability partnership, like transferability of investment in a partnership firm to somebody else. So transferability is not that easy. So company is the most suited to raise large finances for the business. That is why all the large businesses, they choose to have their business through a business organization, that is a company. So moving on to perpetual succession. So perpetual succession essentially means that perpetual means forever and succession means one after the other. So the life of the company is not linked to life of its members or the life of its managers or directors. So perpetual succession means that the membership of the company may change from time to time, but this does not affect the continuity of the company. So as we know that a company is an artificial legal person, it is a creation of law. So it does not suffer from any physical illness or incapacity as natural human beings. So it is an artificial entity which is born artificially through law. And being an artificial entity, it also can die artificially through law. So a company comes to an end, or an existence of a company comes to an end through the procedure or process that is prescribed by law. So this feature of transferability of shares, it allows the company to conduct business uninterruptedly as the identity of the owners change. The shares change from one hand to other hand, thereby avoiding complications of member withdrawal, which are common among other business forms such as partnership or sole proprietorship. The variation in members of their identity. So, variation in members or their identity does not affect the legal existence and identity of the company, because there is a segregation of the identity of the company and the identity of the individual shareholders. So even if all the members of the company, they leave or die or transfer their shares, then also the life of the company will not come to an end and it will continue to exist. Now there are various ways or modes through which membership change may occur in a company. So the membership of an incorporated company may change either because one shareholder has sold or transferred his shares to another, or his shares devolved on his legal representatives on his death, or he ceases to be a member under some other provisions of the Companies Act. Thus, perpetual succession denotes the ability of a company to maintain its existence by the succession of new individuals who step into the shoes of those who cease to be members of the company. As is remarked by a very noted academic of company law, Professor L.C.B. Gower, he says, and I quote, "Members may come and go, but the company can go on forever. During the war, all the members of one private company, while in general meeting, were killed by a bomb.